I thank you in advance for your support in subscribing and sharing these stories with others who you know might enjoy this kind of content. And today, we'll continue with the series of paranormal stories from the island of Cuba. My father was a bus driver in the countryside of Havana, and he told me this story many years ago. It didn't happen to him, but it happened to a close friend of his who has since left this world. A wonderful person I had the fortune to know. This took place in 1982. My father recounts that Arturo was one of the most senior and experienced drivers at the company. Because of his seniority, he had the right to request whichever work shift he wanted, but he always insisted on taking the shift that no one else wanted. They called it La Confronta's shift. It was the shift that began at 10:20 p.m. and went until 3 a.m. The other drivers would always say to him, "Arturo, you're getting old, ask for the day shift." But he'd always reply, "No, I like driving at night. Early in the morning it's cool, there's no traffic, fewer passengers, and I don't have to deal with people annoying me every 5 minutes asking to get off at unscheduled stops." This conversation repeated every night when Arturo arrived at the terminal. He always arrived early for work. By 9:30 p.m., he was already preparing. He always brought a thermos of coffee and a pack of cigarettes. By 10:10 p.m., he was already on the bus with the engine running so it would warm up, and he would inspect the entire bus to ensure it was in optimal condition to be operated. On the night of December 10th, 1982, the weather was unusually cold for the Caribbean. Arturo arrived as usual, early and ready for work. He chatted for a while with colleagues finishing up their previous shift. They drank some coffee, smoked a few cigarettes, and then Arturo went to his bus. The route covered a stretch of about 30 kilometers or so, with several stops along the way. That night, on the first 3 rounds, he hardly picked up anyone. The streets were empty due to the cold and drizzle. On his last round of the night, leaving the town of Buenaventura, he picked up 3 young guys. At the next stop, he picked up a girl. The girl dropped coins to pay into the metal box, where fare was collected, and Arturo heard the coins fall. He greeted the girl, but she just nodded. She didn't say anything for the rest of the trip. He didn't pick up anyone else, and no one else got off. At the penultimate stop before arriving at the bus terminal, the 3 guys got off, but Arturo didn't see the girl get off. It seemed strange, but not unusual. Sometimes people fell asleep and woke up at the last stop, so before parking the bus, Arturo decided to turn on all the interior lights, but there was no one else inside the bus. "She probably got off with the boys and I was distracted and didn't see her get off," he reasoned. Several uneventful days passed until another rainy and cold night. Around 3 a.m., on his last round back to the terminal, the girl was at the stop again. She boarded again, put the coins in the metal box, and again greeted Arturo by nodding. Arturo kept an eye on her through the rearview mirror the entire trip. He picked up a few more people halfway through, but they weren't more than 10. As they approached the terminal, he checked the rearview mirror again and the girl was gone. He stopped the bus, turned on the emergency lights, turned on the interior lights, and searched every inch of that bus, but she wasn't there. It was just him on the bus. This time he felt something was off. He returned to the terminal and didn't tell anyone, but they all noticed that something was bothering him. The next day, the weather conditions were still unfavorable for work, but Arturo knew he had to fulfill his work duties. As usual, he started early. Everything was quiet with very few passengers since the rain deterred people from going out. Halfway through his last round, the girl got on the bus. There was only one other passenger, a man he knew well named Franco, a somewhat tormented individual who always rode the buses for fun. Franco tried talking to the girl, but she didn't answer. She just stared ahead, lost in thought. This time she wasn't going to get away from him. Arturo sped up the bus, put the out-of-service sign, and didn't stop until he reached the terminal. He watched her the entire time through the rearview mirror, and when he turned onto the street in front of the clinic, 3 blocks from the terminal, the girl vanished. But Arturo wouldn't stop until he got to the terminal, so he accelerated even more. He entered the terminal at high speed, causing the tires to screech when he pressed the brakes. Franco almost flew out of his seat. "Hey, you trying to kill me?" shouted Franco. In a jump, Arturo got up from his seat and checked the entire bus again. With all the noise, other drivers came to see what happened. "Are you okay, Arturo?" He was pale from the fright, as he was sure that wasn't an ordinary girl. That was an apparition. Yes, just the bus skidded on the wet road and Franco was with me. "You know how he is," he justified. Everyone knew Franco because he spent his days riding the buses. Franco was upset, but the drivers knew how to calm him down, so they invited him for a cup of coffee. "Come on, Franco, let's have a coffee to get over the shock," invited some of the drivers, while others stayed to talk to Arturo. "Let's go," replied Franco, putting his bag on his shoulder. Franco had already forgotten about the whole thing. The other drivers asked Arturo what had happened. "Nothing, the bus skidded when we came into the parking lot." Among the drivers was a retired driver they called the Old Man. He had retired from driving buses more than 15 years ago, but was always there at the terminal, helping where he could, chatting with them, and entertaining himself. As he used to say, "Better to be here than at home putting up with the boss's nagging," affectionately referring to his wife. And the truth was, all the employees loved and respected him a lot. As everyone was talking, the old man got on the bus and took off the out-of-service sign. If the boss found out, Arturo could get in serious trouble. Arturo saw from the corner of his eye how the old man removed the sign when everyone left. Arturo approached the old man and thanked him. "Don't worry, it's nothing," he replied. "You know, old man, I won't tell them, but I'll tell you because you're a serious man." The old man interrupted him and said, "The dead girl is getting on the bus?" Arturo turned pale. "How do you know about that girl?" "She was the reason for my retirement. The first time I saw her was around this time of year. There was bad weather with rain and a lot of cold. Back then we had fare collectors, they hadn't put the coin boxes yet, and the first night she got on, I didn't see her get off and I thought I was distracted. The second time I mentioned her to the collector when she got on, but in a moment of distraction, the collector didn't see her get off. The collector, like me, sensed something odd about her. He said when she gave him the money she was as cold as ice. And although it was raining heavily outside, she was dry, but she didn't have a coat or umbrella. That gave the collector such a bad impression that he switched to the day shift. I was without a collector for about 3 days, and in those days the summer holidays began. My youngest son was on holiday from the university and insisted on joining me on La Confronta shift. He would keep me company and also help me collect the fares. In those days my son accompanied me. The weather turned bad again. That night there were no passengers, it was just my son and me. And there again was the girl waiting. I told my son to watch her because every time I tried to see where she was getting off, she disappeared. My son looked at me mischievously and said with a mocking grin, "I'm going to tell Mom." I told him it wasn't what he thought. The girl got on, my son charged her, and tried to strike up a conversation, but she didn't speak, she just smiled and kept looking straight ahead. My son asked her which was her stop, if she lived in any of those nearby towns, but she didn't answer. My son even told her that he went to the University of Havana. I think he kind of liked the girl, but she continued in silence. She didn't have an unpleasant expression, she just occasionally looked at my son and smiled, but she didn't say a single word. When I turned near the polyclinic, my son says that right in front of his eyes the figure of the girl dissolved. She disappeared as if she was the smoke from a cigarette. "Dad, she disappeared, Dad, where's the girl?" shouted my son, confused. I hit the bus brakes and we searched every inch of that bus, but she wasn't there. My son was very scared because he saw her as a flesh and blood person. To him, she was a person. The only strange thing about her was how cold she was and that she didn't speak, but apart from that, she was just like any other girl. I asked here at the terminal if anyone knew that girl with that description. I asked all the passengers who got on the bus the following days, but no one knew her. My son told his siblings and my wife. They didn't want me to keep working and I was past retirement age, plus my left eye was failing me. In fact, after that, I almost didn't see anything out of that eye. I don't know if the girl came to scare me into quitting or just appeared, but after that day I decided to retire. And he continued, if I were you I'd take the apparition as a warning. Arturo was also nearing retirement age, and truth be told, those early mornings were becoming difficult, so the next day he spoke with the terminal manager and said he wanted the day shift, but before starting he took 15 days of vacation to adjust to the new schedule. That week there were traditional festivities in the towns that covered the route. That same night, on the last round of La Confronta, which was packed to capacity, two boys from two rival towns started fighting. The fight quickly spread throughout the bus like a wildfire. Some of the boys broke windows and others began using those glass shards as weapons. Several were injured, including the driver who tried to stop the brawl. The driver died a few days later from his injuries, even though he was a young, strong man. In his mind, Arturo thanked that girl for making him change shifts. It was never clear what the girl's intention was, but one way or another, that event made him leave La Confronta and saved his life. Thank you again for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and remember to subscribe and activate the bell icon. Thank you and see you next time.